Hello, I am Crazy Cat 648, or you can call me Grace, and today I was building a bakery cottage style house. It was meant to be more of a bakery, but I kind of made it into more of like a cafe kind of restaurant. And so I went with a very earthy, warm tone color palette, and I started using mangrove wood to make a blueprint kind of layout to see how I wanted it to look. And I wanted a portion of the house to be a cottage where the owners of the shop lived, and then I wanted the other half to be the actual shop. Then I have where I was building up pillars and getting sections, and then I marked out the entrances with brick. Marking the entrances is a really good idea. Then I started to connect the beams together. Then I have it here on the left section where I made it where it was two beams on top of each other. In my mind, it really fits the style. For some reason, it makes it look a bit more sturdy. Usually I have it where I do the roofs as part of the wireframing. For this, I kind of just forgot about the roof and I went straight into doing the foundation for the walls. This one I did mossy cobblestone, mossy stone bricks, dead spiral coral block, and I did cracked stone bricks. Makes it look like maybe it was a little bit overgrown, it's a bit cracked and aged, and it really makes it feel very homey. And I don't know why. It's not as safe to live in that kind of house. Then I started working on the walls where I had stripped birch wood, I had birch planks, I had sandstone, I had sand, and I had cut sandstone. I made it a gradient going from darker at the bottom to lighter on top. It gives this sort of illusion that it's kind of taller. And I used a gradient and just made it kind of like a wavy pattern. Now, if you know how to use Axiom, you probably could just use Axiom to make the gradient you want. I don't know how to use Axiom, and so I just hand placed it and just tried to make it look natural in some sort of way. And if I had tried just to build this for fun, I probably would have used suspicious sand as part of the gradient. Then I started working on the roof. I had an idea of what I wanted for the roof. I wanted a section that had two roofs. I wanted a section that had a much taller portion. And I know the type of roof that I'm using, the roof design, is a very commonly used roof, where it's that very commonly known medieval fantasy roof. I like to use it. I feel like I can use it in my builds, in my build style. But if you don't like that sort of roof, you can experiment with your own. And then I was just going over it, and then having where there's a little bit of an overhanging bit. A, that helps because I like to hang lanterns off of those, and B, it helps it make it look more structurally sound for some reason. And so I was just fixing up the roof, going over it, and then I started to fill in behind the roofs, beside the pillar there, and then I fixed that beam there. And then I was just filling in, I believe that's called a gable or something, behind the roof there. And then fixed beams. And then I started working on filling in the roof. The roof was a little bit tricky for this one. A, because I messed up the roof layout on one of the sections. And B, the gradient I used was a little bit off, and so I had to add blocks and then replace blocks. So for the gradient, I used bricks, I used granite, I used polished granite, I used brown mushroom blocks, I used terracotta, I used waxed exposed cut copper, I I used waxed exposed chiseled copper, and I used waxed exposed copper blocks. It's a lot of different blocks for it. This one I wanted to use a little bit of a, I guess you could call it a weird kind of gradient. But I think this one turned out really good. I do have vanilla tweaks on, and so the bricks might have a different pattern on them. And then I started filling in gradient. I used terracotta for the second layer, and then I used granite. Then I went smooth granite, not smooth granite, polished granite, and I believe it went brown mushroom blocks. Then I went waxed exposed cut copper blocks, and then went waxed exposed chiseled copper blocks, and then went waxed exposed waxed exposed copper blocks. Lots of, so many blocks. And I did have to change out the copper blocks because I accidentally got their unwaxed versions. So you can see the exposed cut copper turned to oxidized copper in the background there. And that is why we experiment and stuff, because that kind of mistakes happen and it's frustrating. And so I was just fixing the gradient, changing out blocks, and I think this roof turned out really good. I usually don't do this kind of style or block palette. This one turned out really good. So I was just fixing the blocks and having axioms where I could just replace the blocks really easily really helped. And then I started to punch out, I'm a bit ahead of the video. I started to punch out the windows for the house. This one I usually have like 2 blocks of air and then like an upside down stair on top. I punch out the windows after I do the walls because I find it just easier to do, and I know exactly where I want the light to come in and such. And then I realized on this portion of the roof, I had got it completely, I had just like got it wrong, and it was like completely off center to those little beams there, and so I fixed that. That is why I should have put the roof in like the first stage of wireframing, but it was a little bit of a tedious fix. And so I just fixed up the roof and just copied the block palette again, but that took me a while. And now you can learn from my mistakes. Don't mess up your roof. Then I started filling in the windows with white stained glass panes, and then there's a window in the back that I use spruce fences. Then I add a little archway for the front entrance there. Then I started working on the inside floor, and I started using stripped spruce logs, stripped spruce wood, spruce planks, some oak wood, and some barrels. Barrels and stripped woods and wood can just all be very like expensive, especially if this is like for like a floor where you could just have like 2 blocks. But for this, I want it to be where like a bit more messier style, and using this all together, it looks really good. And then I used a debug stick to flip the barrels over. If you're in survival, you can just go underneath and place the barrels upside down, but using the debug stick is really easy. Then I started working on fixing the roof up a bit with some stairs. It's really simple, and it really helps to make sure your roofs don't look so jagged from inside. And so I used brick stairs, some polished granite stairs. You call it smooth granite. I used granite stairs, and I used waxed exposed cut copper stairs. And I think it made it look 110% better. And then I started working on a wall to block the cottage off from the main shop. This one I just copied over the initial wall design and just copied it over. I'm pretty sure I could have done that before I put in the floor, but I didn't. And so I just put in blocks, and I punched out a small window. Maybe they could have like passed food or drinks through the window. And I started working on behind the wall. It was like a stove, kind of like furnace kind of thing, where it has stripped deep slate tile, deep slate bricks, cobbled deep slate, and I believe polished deep slate tiles. And I have it where there's like a campfire under a cauldron. The cauldron has a chain. So, like, the cauldron is hanging over and it's like cooking something. It's not really like a proper bakery brick oven. Then I started working on a loft where the owners of the shop would live. And I just used slabs. Doing lofts can be really useful. Then I had a hanging ladder with spruce shelves, spruce trapdoors, and a hanging ladder on top of that. And then I started working on like an area where they would store maybe some food or supplies in barrels, where it's just barrels, campfires, spruce sign, and lanterns. And then I started working on a table like near the windows. Maybe it's like a breakfast nook or like a work table. And they got candles and some pots with some lily of the valley. Having plants around, even like in Minecraft, is like the green really helps, and plants in real life when you have them in roofs can like really help like freshen up the air. And then I have a carpet and some beds and tables and lanterns hanging from the ceiling for the loft. I'm pretty sure nobody would have like 6 lanterns hanging from the ceiling for light, but it's really pretty. And then I have paintings, and I have a little potted azalea, tables, and I have maybe like these are work tables, or like they just have like minimal amount of storage up here, something. And then that rug there, I believe my friend calls it a zygarde. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that right, the zygarde. So, and then I started working on tables for the cafe bakery. I'm not sure what to call it anymore. It's just dark oak stairs and dark oak trapdoors. And I did have a small pile of barrels in the back there. And then after I was done with the tables, I started using some azalea leaves, jungle leaves, and it was either dark oak leaves or oak leaves. Made that hang from the ceiling, so it made it look like there's like vines. It's a little bit overgrown. It also really helped with like atmospherically because of the leaf particles. I love particles in Minecraft so much. They are amazing. And then I added some hanging pots by doing some azalea plants, potted azalea plants, and some lanterns. And then I made a chimney for the stove inside, and the campfire for that. Then I added the same potted plants and the hanging lanterns on the outside of the house. And I also did hanging roots. It really helps kind of like tie in the roof, where it's like this like peachy lighter tone, and it helps make it look a bit more overgrown, rustic, cottagecore. And then having hanging lanterns can help atmospherically. And then I started to work on placing some barrels around, and then I was working on just putting, and then I put some barrels around. It can really help like look like this like an active building, and people are like storing items or delivering items or using this place. And so it's just like a few different piles of barrels, and then the lanterns can help with like moss spawning, or if you like have like a small farm and it needs light. And then I added some flower beds with some podzol, moss, grass blocks, and some bushes. And then inside I added some hanging pots and lanterns. And then I started decorating the beams of the house with some dark oak shelves and some dark oak signs. And a really good tip, if you have like a world and it's like lagging out just because of like signs, if you wax the signs, it can really cut down on lag. I don't know why, but waxing them just cuts on lag. Then I added some hanging lanterns to the overhanging edge of the roofs. And then I started working on a tree. And I used some mangrove wood, some jungle wood, oak wood, some stripped spruce wood, and some spruce plank. I'm not the best at building trees. I mean, I can build trees, but I'm not the greatest at making them look accurate to real life in any way. And so what I know about trees is they just have a main trunk, they have roots, and they have branches. And so I made a few branches, I had some roots, and then I started covering it in 3 different types of leaves. I had mangrove leaves, I had birch leaves, and I had azalea leaves. Mangrove leaves were kind of like the shadow of the tree. So I'm a little bit ahead of myself with this voiceover. I need to wait for catch up. I had mangrove leaves kind of be like the shadow of where the leaves are. And then I had it where the lights hits it where the azalea leaves are, so it looked like lighter, a bit more saturated. And I had birch leaves kind of be like the block that goes between the azalea leaves and the mangrove leaves, and it helps it not look so static and it makes it look more realistic. And then I started working on a path. If you have other builds in your world that you want to connect to, you can connect these paths to somewhere. I used dirt path, packed mud, mud brick, some brown mushroom blocks, mossy cobblestone, mossy stone bricks, and I believe it was cracked stone bricks or stone bricks. And I also had moss. And that is just making the path look a little bit overgrown, a little bit aged. And then I probably should have added some buttons to give it maybe some like pebbles, but I forgot about buttons. And then it's just fixing the path and then texturing it a bit. Here I redirected it a little bit. And then I added some pots, and when I also did some candles. The candles can help light up the path and give it a little bit of decoration. And then I bone mealed around. I bone mealed the moss, and then I did bone meal the grass and replace the flowers using World Edit with Lily of the Valley, Azure Bluet, Oxeye Daisy, and Short Dry Bush. And you can just replace those by hand. But thank you for watching me build this bakery cottage. And I hope that I will see you in the next video. And goodbye!